Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's FPL Yusuf and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going into our second part of this three-part series where we discuss all different types of players from a certain category. We look at all different price ranges starting from the cheapest all the way up to the premiums, just to give you guys as much information as you can before picking your final team ahead of the Game Week 1 deadline, which is in a couple of weeks' time. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Welcome back, guys. Thank you for joining me for another video on my YouTube channel today. Like I said in the intro, today we're going to be covering the part 2 of this little three-part series that we're doing, and it's going to be all around midfielders today. So let's just get started straight in with the cheap ones. So we're going to jump straight into this video and we're going to be starting off with the cheap ones. Now, I've priced the cheap midfielders at 6.5 million and under. I know some people may argue that 6.5 is probably maybe around mid price range, but I've put them in the lower bracket, and you'll see why as we get later on into the video. Okay, so let's start off with the cheapest one that we've got on this list, and that is Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa. Now, he is someone who has had a terrific start to pre-season. Obviously, with Moussa Diaby leaving, Aston Villa going over to the Saudi League, I think that frees up a winger option. Now, I was contemplating whether to put Leon Bailey on this list for Aston Villa, because I did feel like Aston Villa needed some sort of representation on this list. But Bailey at 6.5 million versus Rogers at 5, I thought the price difference you could save in that 1.5 million, I felt it was just better to go with Rogers. He's had a terrific start to the preseason. He's got 3 goals in 2 games. As I said, currently coming in at 5 million on FPL. He has an expected goal involvement of 0.24, which is okay. Obviously he was injured last season, so we didn't get to really see too much of him. But I think this season could be a little bit of a breakout year for him. And I think at 5 million, like I said, it's sort of weighing it up between either him or Bailey. And I just think with the way money is structured this year and how tight we have to be in other areas, I think that 1.5 million could be quite a big saving. So yeah, Morgan Rogers is going to be first up on this list. Okay, so now just a little bit above him, coming in at 5.5 million, we've got 2 players on this list. The first one is going to be Callum Hudson-Odoi from Nottingham Forest. Now, Nottingham Forest, as I've spoken about in the defensive side of things in that video, they've got a very good start to the season. They've got a lot of green fixtures, and Hudson-Odoi is someone that I expect to have a good season this year. Now, I think all it takes for him is just a consistent run of games, which I don't think he's ever really had throughout his career. Forest have started off pre-season quite well. They've been scoring goals. Chris Wood's been playing up front for some games, Tyrell Wanwi for others. But I do expect Hudson-Odoi to be kind of like a starter for them in the coming season. I think at 5.5 million with the start of fixtures that they've got, I think it's actually quite beneficial for him. And I think we're all going to be looking for that sort of cheap price, budget enabler type midfielder that you can kind of look at and just say, right, we can have him in the team. Certain games we'll bench him because he doesn't cost us a bombshell. Other games, against maybe weakened teams, we can play him and hopefully get some returns. So I think he just kind of fits that bill perfectly. And like I said, with the way transfers work this season in terms of rolling, if that's someone you can sort of bring in and just sort of set and forget and just leave him in your team, know that you'll get some games out of him and some games you have to put him on the bench, I think it's one less headache to think about going forward. Now, the second midfielder pricing at 5.5 is Daichi Kamada, obviously a new signing for Crystal Palace. I think he's going to have a very good season. Obviously, he's played under Glasner before in the Bundesliga. Crystal Palace took him up on a free transfer. Obviously, with Elise leaving, that leaves up a space somewhere in that midfield, whether it be on the right-hand side or maybe somewhere central. And I do think that Kamada's gonna get off to a good start. I do think he'll be a starter for Crystal Palace. Had a good start to pre-season as well for them. They picked up a 6-3 win in their first game, so they're off to a good start. Sort of picking up where they left off with the goals at least. And yeah, I just think at 5.5 million again, someone who, the same as sort of Callum Hudson-Odoi, the same with Morgan Rogers, is that some games you'll want to play him, some games you won't. But you've got that option. Now, unfortunately, we haven't got any data on him in terms of expected goal involvements, but he did have a very good season last year in the Bundesliga. So, if he can come in and just sort of do somewhat near that job, I think he'll be definitely worth the value. Okay, so now onto the 6.5s, which is the premium end of the cheaper options, shall we say. The first one I'm going to come up with is Christopher Nkunku. I think a lot of people will be looking at him. Like we said about budget stretching, there's a massive gap between him and Cole Palmer of a 4 million saving. Is Cole Palmer worth 4 million more than Nkunku? I think time will tell, and we'll have to wait and see on how many minutes he plays. Obviously, if Nkunku starts playing up front for Chelsea, then it's a no-brainer. Do you know what I mean? I think Palmer will get penalties regardless, but I think Nkunku at 6.5 million could be a very, very good price option, and maybe the steal of the season this year. So yeah, for me, I think Christopher Nkunku will probably be most people's teams unless you have Cole Palmer. I don't think people will double up on him, but I think if you're somebody who's trying to save budget and trying to just spread your money elsewhere, and it's difficult this season, I think Nkunku saving that 4 million difference between Cole Palmer, I think is more than a viable option. Obviously, he has got very good goal involvement, coming at 0.59, so he's close to averaging nearly at least a goal and assist every game. I think the key with him is one, is he going to stay fit, and two, where is he going to play? I don't think Chelsea have a massive amount of options. They haven't really started pre-season that great either, so I think if you're going to spend money on a Chelsea asset, I think maybe Nkunku might be a little bit more of a smarter move for now. Obviously, we know that Chelsea's fixtures swing in game week 2, so we'll have to wait and see how that one plays out for them. Finally, my last option at this price range is Dominic Szoboszlai. Now, he's someone that I haven't really seen many people talk about. 6.5 million for me. He just played in the number 10 role in Liverpool's pre-season game against Real Betis and actually got the winner. They won 1-0, through a Szoboszlai goal. I do think that this could be a big season for him. Pricing at 6.5 million, someone who will be on the pitch, and when they are on the pitch will have set pieces, whether it be corners, free kicks. I spoke about Trent in my last video, so if you own Trent and Szoboszlai, you've covered pretty much all of Liverpool's set pieces there. And I do think he's someone that if Arne Slot does start with a 4-2-3-1, could have a really, really big season, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about him. So he's someone in my latest draft, which I'm going to make a video for that in probably a couple of days time. You'll see he's in there. So yeah, for me, Dominic Szoboszlai, 6.5 million. I think it's quite a good price for him. Okay, so on to our mid-price midfielders. And we're going to start off with Eberechi Eze. Now, obviously, he had a fantastic end to last season. The last sort of 10-12 games for Crystal Palace, they were just on fire. They were free scoring. I see a lot of people have got him into their initial drafts, which, obviously at 7 million is understandable. He's coming in with an expected goal involvement of 0.65, which, for a Crystal Palace man is very good. Now that Elise is gone, is there more of a chance he's on penalties? I think it would be between him and Mateta fighting that out. I don't know. I don't think we can definitively say that he's going to be on penalties, but I think for set pieces, free kicks, he will be on that anyway. Penalties would just be an added bonus. I do worry about Eze in one regard, and that is I always felt he was playing better when Elise was there. I felt like when Elise was injured throughout the season, he was playing. I don't know if he had as much of an impact as when Elise was with him, which is obviously understandable. Eze is going to be picked up more. He's going to be marked out the game a little bit more because there's less threat coming from Crystal Palace. But at 7 million, I think he's still a decent price. I think he'll be in a lot of people's teams just trying to save budget, especially if you're going for Haaland. I don't know if you can really afford that many premium midfielders, so you're going to have to look in the sort of mid-range price bracket anyway. I think Eze I think he's a fine option. I don't know if he's the best out of these five, but I think for the price he is, I think he's a decent pick. Okay, second up is Bryan Mbeumo. Now, this is someone that I am keeping an eye on for two reasons. Number one, he has got an exceptional goal to game ratio, goal to assist ratio. As you can see, his expected goal involvement is 0.71, which means he nearly averages 1 goal a game. I think there's been a lot of links with Ivan Toney leaving as well, which I think for me, if Toney does leave, it makes Mbeumo that much more of a pick that you'd want to go for. He'd be on penalties if he was on the pitch. Usually when we saw Toney suspended last year, he played through the 90 minutes anyway with Visser up front. And I just think he's a fantastic player who I think would tick over nicely. Obviously someone who's playing up front as a midfielder, it's an extra point for the goal, extra point for the clean sheet. So, I think for me, he's someone that if I had to have a straight shootout between him or Eze for this price range, I think I'd probably be swerving more towards Mbeumo. But obviously that is dependent on whether Ivan Toney leaves or not. So we'll have to keep our eyes out and just stay tuned to see what happens with that. Okay, so third up on this list is going to be just a little bit of a price increase now, and at 7.5 billion, and that's going to be Anthony Gordon, who I think a lot of people you'll see starting the season with him for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was such a big part to what Newcastle were doing last season. He had a great year by his own rights. Obviously Newcastle's fixtures at the start of the year, along with Aston Villa, probably got two of the best starts, for the first sort of 6-7 game weeks. So for me, Gordon's kind of like a no-brainer in this position. The only thing I'd say with him is that his expected goal involvement isn't as high as what you'd probably imagine. I think that's just because his away form wasn't too good last year. But to be honest with you, I think that in itself wouldn't worry me at all. I think that eventually that's going to come. He's not going to only score at home games and just like blanking all the away games. He will find form there. Newcastle were a little bit hit and miss for a lot of last season. It was only him and Isak who really were somewhat consistent throughout the year. So I think Newcastle with a fully fit squad again, Nick Pope back in goal, Tonali back into the midfield. I think it will just change the dynamic of how Newcastle play, and that can only be a good thing for someone like Anthony Gordon. And pricing at 7.5 million, I think he's got to be one of the first names on the team sheet this year. Okay, so another I couldn't pick between this one. You know, both of these players from Liverpool are priced in the 7.5 million. If you look on screen, you see their stats. They are literally nearly identical. So it's Luis Diaz and Diogo Jota. Both of them in the 0.5s for expected goal involvement. They're practically the same player. Now, I think the big thing for me on here is two things. Number one, when we see them both back in pre-season, I think it will give us a better idea of who's going to start where. I think if Jota is their main number 9, I think he gets the pick above Diaz all day long, because Jota, you know, I think all of us have been crying out for him to get some starts up front. Obviously, you know, Darwin Núñez is obviously there as well, so that does play a little bit into the factor of who you're going to pick. But I think for me, with these two, it's really hard to tell at the moment. I think we'd have to just wait and see a full squad Liverpool lineup and just see how they set up first before we make that choice. But I think if you had both of them playing, I think I'd probably swerve more towards Jota, just because, you know, he's a finisher. You know, Liverpool will create chances. You know, whether or not they hit the ground running with Slot is a different question, but they will create chances. You know, with the attacking talent they've got, Salah, Trent, Szoboszlai, Diaz, Darwin, you know, they will create chances for themselves. And out of all of them, I think Jota is just the best finisher. So I put both of them on this list, but to me, it's going to depend on how we see once they have their full squad back lineup. And finally, as an Arsenal fan, I'm so glad to have this man on the list, and that is Martin Odegaard, who I think personally is going to have a fantastic season this year. He's looked really, really sharp in pre-season already. You know, just coming up against Man United, just finishing off, they just picked up a 2-1 win, and he's just looking really, really good. I think for me, because I've said with budget this year, you know, there's a little bit of a price difference of 1.5 million between him and Saka, and I think that could be quite detrimental to how the rest of your team lines up. So I do think Martin Odegaard is more than a viable pick. Obviously, if Saka wasn't on the pitch, you imagine either him or Havertz would be on penalties as well. He'll be on set pieces, and I just think his overall play, he's kind of instrumental to how Arsenal do everything. So for me, I think at 8.5 million, you're getting a steal there. I think he will start to pick up points as the season goes on. I think you'll see more assists. Hopefully he'll add to more goals like he did this season prior. But yeah, overall, I just think at 8.5 million, just in that sort of mid-range bracket, I think he's a solid pick. Okay, so we've covered the cheap options, we've covered the mid-price options. We're now going to get on to the big talking points, which is the premiums. Okay, so the premium midfielders now. I've priced these guys at 9.5 all the way up to Salah, which is the most expensive at 12.5. We're going to start off with the cheapest, quote unquote, out of all of them, and that's Phil Foden, coming in at 9.5 million. I think it's actually quite a fair price for him. Now, I think Foden is going to be one of those players that you're going to want to pick up if you're going without Haaland in the draft, because you're going to want to cover the Man City attack in some regard. Will he be back for the first game week? Obviously, you know, he went to the finals with England in the Euros. I'm not sure. But I think if you're going without Erling Haaland this year, I think Phil Foden is a must for you, just to get someone who's going to probably play most minutes to cover that City attack. If you have Haaland in your team, I think there's probably less likely of a chance that you'd want to go for Foden, just for the sake of doubling up at the price that they're both at. I think it's a lot of money to spend on two Man City players who are going to take up a lot of your budget. So yeah, for me, Phil Foden is one of those players that if you haven't got Haaland, he's a must for you. If you do have Haaland, then I think there's a question to be had. Maybe you could look elsewhere. Okay, so on to the £10 million midfielders now. We're going to start off with Heung-min Son. Obviously, an expected goal involvement of 0.59 last season. I'm not sure about Son, if I'm being honest with you. I'm not sure about Spurs in general. I think it's one of those things that Spurs are always going to be Spurs, right? They'll have games where they play well. They'll have games where they won't play well. I need to see more from them. I need to see how they line up. I need to see if Son's going to start up front, if he's going to play on the left, which I think does have a big impact. I think if he's playing as the number 9, that price tag is maybe a little bit more justified. I think 10 million, I was expecting it to be a little bit lower. I think maybe I was, in my head at the start of the season, I was expecting to be somewhere around the 9, maybe 9.5. But, you know, 10 million, he's always going to get goals because he's Son. You know, he's a good finisher at the end of the day. I just don't know if at this price point versus some of the other midfielders, if he would be the first name on my team sheet. Which brings us nicely on to Bukayo Saka, who's also at that similar price point. And as you can see, in terms of the expected goal involvements, there's just night and day between them. You know, Saka's averaging 0.81, which is nearly a goal or assist every game. And for me personally, if you're paying that type of money for someone, you want as much of a guarantee as you can. Now, obviously, he's on penalties for Arsenal, probably will continue to be Arsenal's main penalty taker. He will be starting in that right mid spot, right wing spot, whatever you want to call it, every single game without fail. You know, Saka just doesn't get a break, doesn't seem to get rested, so he will play through. The only way he doesn't stop playing is if he's injured, which, you know, for him, he's actually been very, very good, actually, to be fair, with his injury record. So, yeah, for me, Bukayo Saka at 10 million, I think a lot of people will probably want to start the season off with him. You know, obviously, Arsenal have a favourable fixture against Wolves at home. Their fixture's a little bit of a mixed bag, I must say. I think it probably affects the defensive side of things more than the offensive side of things. You know, Arsenal can score against anyone, really, on their day, so I don't think that really would bother me too much. But yeah, I think Saka at 10 million, I think he was someone that I would just prefer to either pay the extra 0.5 over Foden or pay the same price as Son. I'd rather go for Bukayo Saka. Okay, now the biggest price rise in FPL history, and that's Cole Palmer, who's coming in this year at 10.5 million. I have to be honest, it was a lot more than I expected. I thought maybe an 8.5 at max, maybe a 9, but 10.5 million is a lot of money for someone who has just had one season last year, albeit that season was exceptional. Now, his expected goal involvements is crazy. You know, he's averaging nearly a goal a game, coming in at 0.88. Will probably be on penalties for Chelsea. I don't see Nkunku taking that off of him. I think the big question for him and Cole Palmer is, do you go for Palmer for the certainty, or do we take the price difference between Nkunku and Palmer and put all our eggs on Nkunku and use that money to spread elsewhere? I think Cole Palmer, just every time he plays for Chelsea versus when he doesn't, I think you can see how different Chelsea are. Chelsea just played obviously against Celtic, losing 4-1, I believe it was, in a pre-season game where Palmer was nowhere to be seen. And I just feel like it happened last season where Arsenal beat them 5-0. Palmer wasn't available for that game. And Chelsea just look a different team without him. When he's there, it looks like they could just give him the ball and he will just make things happen. Whereas when he's not there, everyone kind of just looks like a little bit lost, a little bit clueless. So I think if you are somebody who's thinking about getting Cole Palmer, my first thing will be, if you're going to get him from game week 1. Don't waste the transfer in getting like a Foden for game week 1 or a Saka for game week 1 and then just transferring to Palmer from game week 2 for the fixtures, because Palmer can score against anyone. You know, Chelsea can get a penalty in any game, so he's got route to points, which are very easy. So yeah, if you're looking at getting Cole Palmer, I would say just don't worry about wasting a transfer in game week 2. Just get him from game week 1. I know it's against City, but you know, he did score against them last season. I don't know if it was a brace or a single one in that mad 4-4 game. So yeah, if you're going to go for Cole Palmer, just make sure you get him from the start. Don't worry about like leaving game week 1 and then try and transfer him in and waste a transfer. It's not worth it. So yeah, that's Cole Palmer. And finally, we're going to go for the FPL king, Mo Salah, coming in at 12.5 million, the most expensive midfielder. And as you can see on screen, by those stats, rightly so, he has an expected goal involvement of 1.01, which means he averages a goal or an assist every game, which means two things. Number one, you're always going to get a return from him. But number two, he's always a viable captaincy option. I think when you're paying these premium prices for players, I think that is one of the arguments that you have to make for them, is that could you captain them every week and hope or expect them to get a return? And I think with Salah, you know, he's been the best FPL asset for like the last sort of 6-7 years. He's been so consistent. It's 200 points plus every season. I don't expect anything to change this year, if I'm being honest with you either. You know, Trent down that right hand side, I do expect Liverpool to be a little bit more on the front foot this year. I think despite them finishing third, I think it was a little bit of an off season for them last year, which, you know, was kind of surprising with a Klopp team. You know, I don't think Salah was really, I'm not sure if he was really on it last year. I'm not sure if he was really getting on and liking everything that was going on behind the scenes. But I think this year it's a fresh start for him. And, you know, at 12.5 million, I think he's probably one of those premiums that you can just say is worth every penny. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a thumbs up and subscribe down below. I really hope that this series is helping you guys. Obviously, you know, we're just trying to go around sort of all the price brackets to give you guys as much choice and as much freedom to have a look at other options, as well as just your basic template players. Like I said, we're going to be finishing off this series in the next couple of days with the forwards. I'm going to be back with an FPL challenge video just explaining the rules around that. Obviously, we have the first 4 game week announced for that as well, which is great. I'm also going to be back with an updated draft video, because my latest draft has changed a lot since my game week 1, my first one that I put up I think about a week ago now. So I'm going to be back as well next week at some point with an updated draft video, so just so you guys can see kind of like where my head's at and maybe like some of the choices that I'm thinking about making. But like I said, if you have enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching. If you wouldn't mind dropping a thumbs up and subscribing down below, that'd be greatly appreciated, and I'll catch you guys next time.